Welcome everyone to another episode of Sports Business Insider. I am Denzel Snipes, and this is Sean Russell, the MLB slash. Uh, he might have done a little bit of NBA. I don't know. NFL agent. Usually we come to you guys on Wednesday nights, but something happened. We had a kind of time shift, so we're coming to you with a special Thursday edition of Sports Business Insider. So thank you all for tuning in. Also, as I run the banner down here, just know that you can follow us on all of our social media channels at Sideline Sport One. And also, as I get into some of these shows, well, Top Rope Talk is every Monday at 8 p.m. Excuse me, I'm sorry, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's with myself, occasionally with Billy Cruz, the wrestling professor himself. That is all pro wrestling all the time. So, in this next episode, we're gonna have an AEW recap episode, AEW All In recap episode. Of course, that pay per view being this Sunday, live from Wembley Stadium in London, England. Also, we got the Sideline Sports Show, which is every Tuesday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's with JB Ellis, John Shear, Dave DeRocher, and Rafael Esparza as well. That is a looking back at the week in sports, some hot topics, Sideline Sports quick hits, you name it. It's the flagship show, so please tune in and follow us as well. Also, we got Confidential, Chicago Cubs centric show that's going on Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's what host JB Ellis. Also got commentators Tyler Ingham. You also have Nick Bockins as well as Jason Chartrand. That's all Chicago Cubs all the time. So if you're a Cubs fan or if you're a fan of anyone else in the NL Central, you want to come and engage in some banter. That's all good. Sometimes we may even throw you a link and bring you on a panel if it's one of the teams that the Cubs face. Also, on Fridays is the Gauntlet. That's every Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's with myself, JJ Jenkins, James Tatum, Dom DeRubis, and Tyler Ingram. All NFL, all the time, baby. We hit you with the sports moron of the week, everyone's favorite. Of course, the topics, some also rapid fire, rapid fire topics, and then also non-sports topic that has elicited some really great discussions in the past. So tune in because we are back for. See, this is the first year that we've had split seasons. Like we had season 4 part 1, now this is season 4 part 2. Okay, so tune in. We will be with it, and one of these days, Sean's gonna pop up on there. Wait till someone signs a big deal. We're gonna have Big Sean on there. So that is the Sideline Sports Network. Of course, more to come with everything. But now let's go ahead and get started. Sean, how you doing tonight, man?
No, how's everything going, boss? Good to see you.
Doing pretty good, pretty good. Good to see you too. So tonight's episode is going to be a look at the business aspect of UFC. Ultimate Fighting Championship, everyone's favorite fight league. Established in 1993, Dana White has been involved since the inception. So, first question: how the UFC became as popular and profitable as it is? Sean, take it away.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. So on the outset, honestly, it was really, I don't want to say it was small market, but it was really a niche sport. It's kind of like boxing. You had your crowd, and that was the crowd that was going to be there. They followed it. They were diehard fans, and that was the crowd you were going to draw. What Dana White and the Feder brothers did early on is they decided early on just heavy brand marketing, just to market the biggest stars. Gracie, Shamrock, Severn, and these guys became household names over those first 2 years, 93, 94. And I believe it was early 95, Shamrock and Severn made WWE debuts, which just shows you the marketing power that Dana White put behind these guys, that Vince McMahon was enough to be like, hey, he may have something here. And if they don't want to fight anymore, I'll bring them here because they already have a brand name. So he did a great job being aggressive with the marketing. And even with the budget being small, again, he focused on his top guys. Like, he had his undercard, but he focused on pushing his top guys. He knew that was going to bring in the outside crowd. And then when he had two guys go crossover, I think that really kind of jumped his momentum, because then they're like, wait, these guys came from where? We got to check this out.
But go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was let's see here. Yeah, it was. I actually can recall being younger and seeing the Ultimate Fight Championship advertised on pay per view, and I was like, "Oh shoot, these guys are like this. This legit looks like Bloodsport." of course, my favorite Van Damme movie and one of my favorite movies of the 1980s as well. And I was like, man, this is crazy. Like these dudes are in the octagon, and to those of you all out there, you're more than welcome to go, of course, and look up old clips of it. But it wasn't always, the dudes in tights with the 8-ounce gloves and everything. They were showing up to the ring in anything, like Tank
It
Abbott
was
showed
very
up in
gritty,
jean
very
shorts.
gritty. Yeah,
Royce Gracie wore his gi. Some guys wore, the really short tights, like the shoot fighting gear. Some were barefoot, some were shoes. Like it was just kind of I don't want to say really a free for all because it really was MMA, but to a certain extent it was a free for all. Not only that, but it was much more brutal. The rules were a lot more relaxed.
yeah. No, and back then, because they were just starting, Dana knew he couldn't do a pay per view every month. That would oversaturate the few fighters he did have. He didn't have enough of a roster to do a pay per view every month, so he did it every 3 months. And he charged, I believe it was like 109 or 129 per
Yeah.
pay per view back then. But it's because he did it every 3 months, so he was justified. I'm gonna give you this big card every 3 months, but I'm gonna charge you the same thing WWE charges you every single month, but in one shot.
Yeah.
Um, so he did it smartly though, because like I said, he had about 12 to 14 fighters that were consistently on the pay per view cards, and if you did that every month, he would have watered down the product too early. And what he also did early on is he took it international, mainly Japan, but the global expansion, because of how it boosted with Severn and Shamrock, enables him then to do events in Japan, which Japan is obviously much more wide open in terms of actual fighting like this versus we have more in entertainment wrestling, not as much UFC in the United States. But Japan at that time had a lot more fighting, UFC, MMA type style fighting. So that crowd ate this up, and that's really where Dana started to make his most profit, was over in Japan.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And considering that because Pride FC came a little while later and those had relaxed rules as well. And some of your favorite MMA stars, even from UFC, have fought in Pride FC as well. Now with UFC, of course, originally being on pay-per-view, but nowadays things are a little bit more modernized. UFC's what, 31 years old, 32 years old now, and now it's available on multiple streaming platforms as well as on ESPN Plus. Dana White has made the UFC millions on media rights and distribution deals. Sean, if you want to dive a little bit deeper into that.
Yeah, so as they grew, he also had a reality show in 2005, which I think really kind of started to play into the UFC has life outside of just what goes on during the cards. And I think that really started to pique people's attention, especially as we started to enter that e- cable cutting era. And so they've jumped on. You can catch it on. I believe they're on Peacock at certain times, but they're on ESPN. Um, they have some of their older fights on other platforms. You can catch them on Prime Video. So he's got them all over the place now, compared to just having that pay per view outlet. So he's grown this up to $1 billion in terms of media rights, and that's what they expect in 2025 when the new media rights deal is. He won't be just getting $1 billion offer. He'll be getting a couple of $1 billion of an offer for the UFC media rights deal. That's how huge Dana White has made the UFC.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So the reality show, Ultimate Fighter, if you want to touch on that one, because we have seen some. I mean, it was a reality show, but it
Honestly, it
was
was
one of the.
a lifeline for them.
It
It,
was,
it
yeah,
became a recruiting tactic for Dana, because after that initial rush in '93, let's say to like '99, from 2001 to 2005, they didn't have a lot of guys that were very marketable. And as much as Dana is a marketing genius, they were just not getting the same attention. They had Congress on them about it being human cockfighting and other
yeah,
comments coming out of Congress that they fought off from John McCain. Um, it was a tough stretch, 2001 to 2005, almost where it looked like it may go away, because they were just struggling that bad to pull in the same ratings. So in 2005, I think kind of as a desperation effort, they put on this reality show, The Ultimate Fighter, and this ends up turning into it's essentially a scouting ground. And now today it's called Dana White's Ultimate Championships or something, and he offers contracts at the end of it. Um, but to this day, they still use it now as a way to not only develop but find new fighters.
Yeah.
And it really became a a lifeline for UFC in that mid 2000s where they were struggling. A lot of good fighters have come out of there, um, and by that, they regained their popularity. It took 11 years to rebuild everything, but 11 years into that, they were sold to Endeavor for $4 billion in
Yeah.
2016.
Yeah.
Um, and Endeavor saw, obviously you can't have this train without Dana White. Endeavor keeps Dana White on, the train keeps moving, and now, like I said, we're looking at a multi-billion-dollar digital deal, media entertainment rights deal on top of, hey, I just sold my company 9 years ago for $4 billion.
Right. And one thing about the Ultimate Fighter, and even though it was a reality show, just so everyone has an idea, this was not your typical reality show. Like this wasn't the Bachelorette or the Bachelor where the winner gets to marry the guy and then they divorce in freaking 3 months or whatever. No, the winner got a contract, and there was even one year, and I forget. I think it was Forrest Griffin, and I forget who else. But the fight was so good, both fighters were offered contracts, and they went on to become UFC legends. So
Yep.
yeah, like they went on to legitimately fight in the UFC and become successes.
No, and like I said, it continues today. The show is now titled under Dana White's name. Um, but it's still the scouting ground it was, and he still offers contracts at the end. And I think that it's a genius idea. You have people come to you, have people send them a resume versus Dana being on the road scouting for talent.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So diving into some of these contracts for the headliners, because just like with any other promotion, of course, the biggest fighters, the biggest stars, they get paid the biggest money and everything. So one that stands out, Khabib, in 2013, his contract was for 21,000 with a bonus of 21,000 for each win. But with each win, he'd also get a pay bump of 3 grand, maxing out at 30,000. Um, if you want to dive deeper into that,
Yeah, so I mean, it was honestly a little eye popping to me that they were only getting 21,000 as a base.
yeah,
You would have figured it would have been at least over 30, 35, which I know would have been more than enough for minimum wage back in 2013. But you would have just figured, given the sport and what they were bringing in, starting around that time, especially since you were 2 years away from your $4 billion offer, it was a little surprising that the base is 21,000, but then you do get a bonus of 21,000 each win. You can bump up your base to a max of 30. So if you say you fight 3 or 4 times, you can end up making 100 grand that year just off of your fights.
yeah,
Now other fighters have pay-per-view deals, which we'll get into in a minute. Khabib, in his, for instance, especially early on, his deal also included a hotel room and 2 round-trip tickets for him and his cornerman. Just one cornerman was allowed that would be covered. If he wanted others, that was going to be out of his pocket. If it's a championship fight, 2 hotel rooms, 3 round-trip tickets, $50 for meal every day, and 2 free tickets to every UFC event in which he participates. Um, a similar contract in 2013 as Matt Hughes. He only got 15,000, but the same thing, 15,000 to win. But his bump up was 5,000, but it maxed out at 25,000. So after 2 wins, his base would have only been 25,000, and then he would have been counting on bonuses. All his other per diem and stuff was the same. Now in
yep,
2014, before we get to Brock, because Brock is his own animal.
yeah,
In 2014, when they signed CM Punk, which was one of the biggest, I'll say next to Brock, one of their biggest signings coming from WWE.
yeah,
Um, he got a 500,000 base, no win bonus. But this is when they started giving out pay per view money, and this is where we're going to start seeing these bigger numbers in the fights when we touch on that later. Punk would get $1 for each pay per view buy for the buys between 200 to 400,000 people. $2 for each pay per view buy once they hit over 400,000 and got to 600,000, and $2.50 for each buy over 600,000. So that obviously, if you have $1 million pay per view, you're making a lot of money just on your pay per view buy money.
yeah,
He also got 3 hotel rooms, 3 round trip tickets, $100 per DM, 2 cornermen who also got per DMs. He got 4 free tickets to each event, and if he's in the main event, 10 to it's also the 4 free tickets also have to be within 10 rows of the octagon.
yeah. It's insane. And that was coming from yeah. It seems like the guys coming from WWE, they were getting some of the big, but also keep in mind, um, Dana White and Vince McMahon were kindred spirits.
100%.
So
And they knew what they were doing. Like I
exactly,
remember when Undertaker would show up over there to pump up a fight with Lesnar.
still does.
That's
Yep.
only allowed because these two are saying, okay, we'll let you do this, you let us do that. Hey, I have a guy interested in fighting, help him out.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, if you want to touch on Brock Lesnar's coming from WWE in 2008.
So Brock, it was interesting because his WWE run, his first run ended sourly for those who know. He left WWE on bad terms, and he wanted to always be a professional fighter, in my opinion. I know he had some things that after college, changed his direction with football and everything. But in my opinion, he always wanted to be a professional fighter. So he goes that way. He has a huge name, obviously, at this time. They give him 1.5 million for his base, no win bonus for his one fight at UFC 100 coming as champion.
Mhm.
If he wasn't the champ, he got 1.375 million base with a pay per view cut. Um, excuse me. If he wasn't the champ, he got a 750K base with a win bonus of 250K base.
Mhm.
If he was the champ in his second fight after winning the belt or his third fight after defending, he would get 1.375 million with the pay-per-view cut of $2 for every buy over 700K.
That's insane.
Now, Lesnar's other details is where it's a little different, where you could see he gets treated, a little bit different as a talent. The two hotel rooms, okay, no big deal. But if he's champion, he gets a suite, one first class round ticket, and two economy tickets. $50 DM for him and two cornermen, 10 tickets for every event, and also within 10 rows if he's in the main event. Um, and obviously that's higher than they had given. But again, it's Brock Lesnar. However many he wants to. If he had asked for 15 tickets, I'm sure they would have given it to him.
Yeah, absolutely. And then coming from Strike Force, Ronda Rousey, ironically, someone who also went to WWE. It seemed like the WWE stars were getting some of the bigger money here. But yeah, if you want to go into Ronda Rousey's,
And her two contracts are interesting, and I think you'll see the change in her branding power in her second contract. But her first contract, she had a 45,000 base, 45,000 win bonus, with a bump of 5,000, maxing at 70,000 for each win. She had pay per view buys, $1, similar to Punk, $1 for 200 to 400, two for 400 to 600, and 250 for over 600. She had two hotel rooms, but she demanded they be 8 days prior to the event. She wanted to be in the city early to be prepped and rested. One business class round trip into economy, $50 per DM, the same. Now she got 4 free tickets within 10 rows. If she was in the main event, she got 8 tickets within 5 rows. That was the first contract.
hmm
Now the second contract, after she made one appearance at WrestleMania, where obviously WWE had taken notice of her record in UFC, 3 million base, no win bonus, the highest base UFC had given anybody at that time. Same pay per view buys, but if the at the 600 to 900 mark, she got $3, and over 900K, she got $4. If she loses her belt due to injury or could not defend her belt or had to remove herself as champion for other reasons other than losing, her base would drop to $500,000 base with no win bonus, no pay per view cut.
yeah,
Traveling per DM on that one remained the same. But again, that was the highest base at the time that the UFC had ever given out. Most of the money the UFC usually gives out is through the pay per view money. The bases stay low. Fighters end up still making millions of dollars on a fight, but it usually is because of the pay per view buys,
yeah.
as we'll see coming up here when we discuss these big bouts who made the most money in UFC.
And you know what? That's a great segue because we're going to discuss the 10 biggest payouts in UFC history in a single fight. Now, keep in mind that is base plus win bonus if applicable and pay per view buys. Sean, go ahead.
So we'll start at number 10 and UFC 129. I believe I believe it was about 2014, somewhere in there, 2013-ish. 4.3 million. It's for George St. Pierre. UFC 202, which is in the 2015-2016 range, and we'll talk about that in a second. Nate Diaz made 4.131 million. UFC 168, Anderson Silva brought in 4.37, and that was one of Anderson Silva's comeback matches, and he racked in more than he probably had made any time between 94 to 2000.
Right.
Now, Now we're going to get to the heavy hitters. Conor McGregor's on the list for UFC 194, 4.47. Ronda Rousey is now on the list 2 times in a row for UFC 193 and 207,
Yep.
going for 4.5 and 4.8. 4.8 at that time being an astronomical jump, the biggest jump in a payout, that we had seen until McGregor's stretch here of having the fourth, third, and second highest payouts in UFC history of 5.5, 5.6, and $6.81 million for individual fights at UFC's
Insane.
196, 202, and 205. And then the biggest individual payout for any UFC fighter to date, Brock Lesnar, 8 million for a single fight at UFC 2000. Um,
200.
it speaks for itself. No base was involved in that. That was what he was paid straight for that fight, $8 million.
Yeah, that's insane right there.
And so you can see most of those top 10 came from UFC's 193 to 205. A lot of those took place the year prior to Dana selling it for $4 billion.
That's crazy. When you look on this list and you see Conor McGregor, is on this list 4 times. We actually discussed Conor McGregor's biggest payday came from when he fought, Floyd Mayweather. Easy to say, the man's not nowhere near broke. Ronda Rousey makes the list twice. I actually thought Lesnar would make the list more than once. He only made it once, but it was the biggest payout.
And that's because Brock was more, just give me the base. I don't really care about anything else. Give me some pay-per-view buys and we're good. Brock was not he was not fussing with I'm not going to tell you whether I'm going to win or lose. Give me my base so I don't have to worry about winning or losing. I'm going to go kick his ass. If I lose, I lose.
Yeah, true. Very, very true. All right, closing sentiments.
No, I mean, so obviously Dana's done some great things with the UFC over 30 years. I obviously the growth that he's done is astronomical, and to have $1 billion deal coming up in the media industry, like we mentioned, it really rivals the big four sports for a fighting promotion to get $1 billion TV deal.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, you could. I think at one point in time they got to start calling it the Big Five. You know, um, but no, that's all that we have, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in for this episode of Sports Business Insider. And there you see, just a little smidge of the business side of UFC. We did boxing last week. We're gonna take a look at some of the happenings on the business side of sports in the next week, and we'll be back to you next Wednesday with another episode of Sports Business Insider. So for Sean Rossi, I'm Denzel Snipes. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you all next week.